Today, we're going to talk about CodeWhisperer and the productivity benefits that it can bring to you. This is our agenda for today. We'll start with why. Some wise guy once said, always start with why, so we'll do that. We do it right. Then we'll talk about how CodeWhisperer can help. We'll dive a little bit into beyond writing code for you, how CodeWhisperer can actually give you customized code recommendations, right? Because, frankly, many of the code recommendations you see from AI tools, although they are correct, they are not useful for your company. So we'll look at how we will make them useful for your company. Then we will introduce CodeWhisperer for command line, because as a developer, you don't spend time only in the IDE. There are other places you spend time. So you want to be productive everywhere you spend time. And then we will introduce Q, which is our new conversational AI assistant for developers. All right, so let's start with why. Why did we build CodeWhisperer? Why did we build Q? The primary reason being there is always a shortage of developers. I'm sure you think every day, oh, only if I had 10 more developers, I would get it done in time, I launch in time, right? But that is the problem across the board. And the developers you have, they'd spend a lot of time writing undifferentiated code. Think about file processing, think about changing the format of data, data analysis, data processing. All of these things are not helping your business. They're not helping your customers. These are just routine things that software engineering needs. And then your developers need to spend a lot of time learning new technologies, APIs. I'm sure AWS introduced like a few hundred new APIs today or during the reinvent. So you have to upskill continuously, right? Imagine if you had an assistant that you could simply ask a question to, and that would give you the latest information right inside your IDE. Now, beyond just writing code, there is security and quality of the code, right? So you spend a lot of time actually finding security bugs in your applications and fixing them. And then there is the most dreaded part of maintenance and upgrades, right? Nobody loves these projects, but they are there. They are critical for your business. Maybe Java 8 is going end of life. You're thinking about what to do next. You have to spend a lot of time upgrading these things. Once again, it doesn't add a lot of value to your business. This is something you just need to do. And then specifically when it comes to using these AI tools, one thing that you have to be mindful of is whether you are using the tool in an appropriate manner when it comes to copyrights and using licensed code, right? So appropriate use of open source is also a concern. You may have to spend a lot of time thinking about whether I'm doing the right thing. And this is where CodeWhisperer comes in, right? So it makes you more productive in your IDE. We'll start our conversation with the IDE first, and then we'll go to other places where you spend time. But CodeWhisperer generates code in real time. So as you're typing, it looks like autocomplete on steroids, right? So instead of giving you one line or one word, it gives you the next 20 lines of your code. CodeWhisperer also helps you scan the code for security issues directly in the IDE. Now, this is what we call shifting left of security concerns, right? So instead of finding these bugs and security issues downstream in your CI/CD pipeline, now you're equipping the developers to actually simply click a button in the IDE, find the issue, fix it right there, so that downstream issues are already taken care of. And then it also flags code that is generated by this AI tool that may be very uniquely similar to an open source piece of code, right? So we let you know that, look, this is a good solution for what you're asking for, but this may be under license by somebody else, and this is the license type. You decide whether you want to use it or not. So let's first start with code generation. A simple example here, right? We are parsing a string, and actually we're extracting some information. Now, once again, this is not like core business logic, but this is string operations that are file operations that everybody needs. So you can simply write an English comment that tells CodeWhisperer what you want to do, and it will generate the code immediately, right, within a second of you typing the comment. It also provides high-quality suggestions for AWS APIs. We have made sure that we have trained the model with high-quality training data when it comes to AWS. So when you say, I want to upload a file to S3, we will make sure that it gives you the right recommendation and not something that you wouldn't use. And then generated code typically matches the coding patterns of the developer. So if you have a specific way of defining your variables, it will learn from your behavior, and it will generate code that looks very similar to what you would like to write. The second feature we talked about is security scanning in the IDE. So with a click of a button, you can actually scan for security issues on the project level. Within less than a minute, we will surface the security vulnerabilities right in the IDE. You can click on the vulnerability, and you can go fix it. And we launched this actually on Sunday. We have now new AI-powered code remediation. So as you find, or as we find the security issues in your project, you can simply click a button that says, fix it for me now. And that's what we'll look at this demo where we'll run a security scan. It will find an issue. Then you go to the line where the issue exists, and you double-click on it, look at the details, and simply say, I want to fix it. Right? So now we are running a security scan. It takes a few seconds. Right? It will run it on the entire project. And when it finds the security issues, it will tell you by each file where the issue is found. Now let's dive into the finding. Right? So the file that we have open, there is an issue. Okay, insecure hashing. Sorry. Let's look at the details. And let's simply say, apply the fix. Okay, what it is suggesting looks great. I'm going to say, apply the fix. It will apply the fix in place where the issue was found. So now you're good to go, right? So we're taking it a step further where we will scan your files for you. We will tell you where the security issues are. And now with a single click, you can actually fix it in place so that you don't have to spend time actually on each of these steps. Also, we have reference tracking. And this is what we talked about like a minute ago when we said, because these AI tools are trained on open source code, sometimes they can generate code that looks very similar to a unique piece of code. So we're not talking about bubble sort here, right? There are like hundreds of thousands of implementations of bubble sort. But think about something that is very unique, written by a single author, that is licensed under a friendly MIT license. But it is still licensed under something, right? So if, by coincidence, CodeWhisperer generates code that looks something like that, we will let you know that the reference code is under certain license. Here is the link to the repository. Click on it, go find the repository, and then you decide whether you want to use the code or not. Now, all of this looks great for individual developers. You want to make sure that you give them the tools, you equip them with the right things. But AI tools, for most companies, they are very new technology, right? It actually creates concerns about data privacy, copyrights, who in my company should use this, who should not be allowed to use this. So enterprise controls are key to actually rolling out these kind of tools across your company. And this is what, if you are a CodeWhisperer professional subscriber, you can go to the AWS console, and you can manage policies. You can manage access in your company. You can say, these 3 teams are allowed to use this, and these 3 teams aren't. And then certain policies, for example, we talked about reference tracking, right? Flagging code that has open source references. If you are very conservative, you might say, look, I don't want any code recommendations that are similar to open source at all. Don't give me the references, don't give me the code, right? Just filter it out. So with a single click, you can actually set these policies across your organization, and they will apply to all of your users. The other benefit here is you can connect your identity provider. So now when I log into CodeWhisperer today, I simply use my Amazon credentials. I don't have to remember a new login password. I'm just going to go in, use my Amazon credentials, and start using it. Right? So you can track who in your company is using these tools. You can have CloudTrail logs on the usage, who are the people who are calling the code generation APIs. That gives you somewhat of a visibility into how people in your company are using these tools. Now the exciting part. We looked at a code recommendation that was something like parse a string or parse a CSV file. That's a great example. But for most people, when you're writing code for your work, you usually use internal code libraries, right? So let's say you have some way to write your UI applications. You have JavaScript libraries that actually define how your UI should look like. Or maybe you have data processing libraries internally. So you don't want to rewrite those things, or you don't want to accept something that comes from open source. That is how it is done publicly, right? You want something that looks very unique to your company. That is what customizing CodeWhisperer can get for you, right? So it can generate code recommendations that use your internal libraries, your internal APIs, packages, classes, and methods, which base model of CodeWhisperer does not have into its training data, right? So you can customize it, and your developers now would have that. It can actually securely connect to code repositories and make sure that it will only use the code that you allow us to use to customize the recommendations. And you can fully control who in your company should have access to a given customization. Now, this is a simple example where we're showing you the UI for the admin, right? So you say create customization, you pick your GitHub repos or GitLab repos, or you can upload the code to S3 and simply click the create customization button, right? So it's a single click process. You don't have to be a machine learning expert. And the customizations are fully isolated from the base model. So we are not going to transfer your knowledge, your intellectual property over to the base model to make it better. This is something that stays in its own boundaries. It is completely isolated from everything else. Even the customizations for your own company, if there are multiple customizations, they are also isolated from each other. Now, this is the admin experience. Imagine you're the admin for your company. You created a customization. You added users to the customization. Now the users are allowed to use that customization in their IDE. So this is how it looks, right? We'll look at an example of creating an AppSync endpoint. We will do that with the default model first. We'll not use the customization. Then we will switch to the customization in the IDE. It's a simple one-click process for the developer. You pick the customization you want, and then when we'll create the code recommendation again, you'll see the difference, right? So this is the foundation model. We are trying to create the AppSync endpoint now. And as you can see, this is, this code looks good. This is pretty solid generic code, right? You might accept this. Now let's do it again. Now we will select the customization that was created for my company, and now we will create the code recommendation again. For the same file, for the same context, same prompt, as you can see, this is much more contextual to how you do things in your company, right? And this is more powerful because just taking a generic code recommendation AI, while it looks useful, it's not it's not taking you 100% there. You will accept a few code recommendations, but you will have to change a lot to make it look like your code, your company's code, And this is where we want to actually take you that final mile where a simple process of customization can help you do much more with code recommendations. Now, on top of that, let's see how we can track the productivity benefits, right? And this question we actually get a lot from a lot of our customers. Let's say we roll this AI tool out to our developers. How do we know that this is any useful at all, right? Well, of course, you can have a few surveys. You can ask your developers whether they are happy, whether they're satisfied, do they feel more productive, right? Most of those things will come out with positive responses because this is a new tool. People like playing with it. The question is, how do you know that this is actually helping them be more productive? So the CodeWhisperer professional subscribers actually have access to the productivity dashboard. In here, you can see how many people in your company have subscribed to CodeWhisperer and how many people every day are actively using it, right? So just the usage trend tells you about whether the developers are happy, do they continue using it on a day-to-day basis. If you see the trend dropping, you know something is wrong, right? You're not going to get the productivity benefits that you're hoping. People are dropping off, they don't like this. So maybe something needs to be done, something needs to be fixed. Beyond that, we also have the code impact card. I'm not sure whether you're able to read the small text. The first one is acceptance rate. So it tells you when CodeWhisperer gives you, let's say, 100 recommendations, how many of them are actually accepted and how many are rejected. Of course, you want this to be as high as possible. And this is, once again, something that can tell you. If you see it as like 5%, 10%, you can pretty much say this thing is not useful for my company, right? So this is a leading indicator of productivity. If acceptance rate is not high enough, eventually you will not see any productivity benefits. We also have the number of lines generated by CodeWhisperer and percentage of code generated by CodeWhisperer. So these are also both important metrics. One tells you the raw productivity, as in the raw output. The other one tells you what is the percent, what is the amount that is taken off the developer's plate. So a developer, let's say in a week, they have written 1,000 lines of code. How many of them were written by the developer manually, they had to type manually, versus how many of them were written by the AI. Now, this is also a very good indicator that tells you whether the tool is being used by developers, as well as whether the tool is actually useful for developers. If they end up writing a lot of code themselves, once again, they're not actually seeing a lot of productivity benefits. We also have a section about, at the bottom, about number of security issues that have been found. So it gives you an overall idea, and this is just version 1. We will add more to the productivity dashboard, right? So it will give you a leading indication of whether your developers are happy, whether they are using it the way they should be using it, and what is the impact on the code they are writing. Also, we talked about customization a little bit, right? So you can, if you have multiple customization, you can actually filter by customization. Let's say you create a customization for each of your teams, and you want to see the productivity benefits for each team, right? You can filter by customization and look at what is the percentage of code written by CodeWhisperer for customization A versus customization B versus the default model. That gives you an indication of whether the customization strategy you have in your company is useful. If a customization is doing much better than the other, you can actually look at, okay, what did we do right with customization 1 and what needs to be changed with customization 2, right? All right, so we talked a lot about how CodeWhisperer can help you generate code in the IDE. But of course, IDE is not the only place where you spend your time, right? So there are many other use cases, there are many other tasks, and Doug will now talk about how CodeWhisperer and then Q can help you get productive at a lot more things.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right, so there's a bunch of new things that happened with CodeWhisperer recently. So just show of hands real quickly, how many people have previously used CodeWhisperer? And by previously, I mean before this week. So a very small number of you. We're going to fix that today. Okay, I'm going to give you all the reasons why you want to use it. So Ankur went over a bunch of the capabilities of CodeWhisperer and what they do, and the session is focused on developer productivity. So how are all these things accruing into your overall productivity? We do a number of different things where we sort of scientifically measure and study and watch user behavior in how they use CodeWhisperer, and have generally found that the code writing task can be accelerated by as much as, I think we're seeing in different use cases, 50 to 60% increase in overall productivity during the code writing task. Meaning you are writing the code that you would have written anyway twice as fast as you were writing it before. So that's pretty awesome. But that's not the only place developers work. Writing code is not the only thing that you do. So now, by show of hands, since I know how many of you use CodeWhisperer, how many of you use a command line? I would expect every single hand to pop up. This is like, all right. So the command line's an interesting place because it's something that generally hasn't changed in, like, I think my lifetime. It's basically still a black box with a prompt. And the challenge is that it's getting more and more complex because of the number of command line interfaces that you work with and the things that you do. So by show of hands, how many people remember all of the commands for all of the CLIs that you use? Yeah, I knew it. I knew it. All right. So let's take a look at how this works. So I've got the command line. I've installed CodeWhisperer for the command line. It's an install. If you just want the command line tools, you can get it. If you want to add the IDE tools, you do that as well. I've logged in, and now I'm sitting here in my good old-fashioned, trusty black box with the blinking cursor. And there's some cool stuff I can do. So for instance, if I was working with Git, I get autocomplete, just like I would get in my IDE. That's part of CodeWhisperer saying, how do we help you be more productive? Half the time, it's just remembering what the next part of the command is. And so doing that autocomplete. And we do that for, let's see, Heroku is another one that people like. We do those. So we support about, I think it's a little over 500 different CLIs. So the chances are whatever you're working on is probably supported by CodeWhisperer for the command line. You get the autocomplete capabilities, you get the stuff. It's just going to make you a little bit faster. And again, part of how I think about developer productivity and when it comes to these tools is I'm not replacing the work you do. The work you do is the work you do. What I want to do is make you faster at the work you do. And so if there's something that takes you 10 minutes and I can help you do it in 5 or 2, then that's a productivity increase. And if I can do that 10 times, 20 times, 100 times, 1,000 times throughout the day, that all accrues to you being much more significantly productive. I mentioned the velocity team from Accenture saying they measured a 30% overall velocity increase on their team. And we've heard similar reports from other customers as well. So this is one little way to do that, but this Q thing is pretty cool. And so if in the command line, I say, I want to talk to Q, then Q says, okay, what are you trying to do? What is it you want to do? So I say, well, I want to list all the, all the T3 micro instances in my account. It says, okay, in order to do that, that's the command you would use. And so I no longer even have to know how to do the autocomplete parts. I just have to know what I'm trying to accomplish. And this is very similar to what we built in CodeWhisperer, where I can express myself in text, in natural language. I can express myself in a comment, and Q and CodeWhisperer will look at that comment, understand the intent, and give you the code to do that. And now we do that in the command line with all your favorite CLIs. So now I can just express myself in text. I get the command. If I want to change something, if I want to change a variable name as part of the command or do something like that, I can say I want to edit that command, I can fix it, I can regenerate it, I can do all these great things. So super cool stuff. And like I said, it works with over 500 different CLIs. So you get the autocomplete stuff, and you get the natural language to command stuff. So I'm not going to list my instances right now. So that's super cool. Let me come back to the summary. I just showed you in real life what I was going to show you in slides. So I'm going to bypass these slides because you saw all of this happening in real life, which is my favorite way to do it. So now, so what I did is I gave you a brief glimpse at how we integrate Q now into this experience. So Q, Amazon Q, is our generative AI assistant that spans all the touch points for how you will work with AWS. Whether you're in your code editor and you're writing code for the applications you're going to run on AWS, you're in the console working with the resources in your account or learning how to use different services, or you're working with your business information out of the scope for this session because we're here talking about developers, but the Q business capabilities to understand all of the information in your enterprise and how you work with it. So if Q is this great assistant that spans all these places, how do we integrate it into our developer experience? So that's the part that's really fun. So you saw just a little bit of that just now, where I can, in the command line, say, hey, Q, help me understand, what is the command for the thing I'm trying to do. But it goes in other places as well. So the console, of course, is a place where people spend a lot of time. And so we integrated Q into the console. I figured I might as well do this one in real life too. It seems more fun. So if I'm logged into the console now, as of this week now, you'll see this Amazon Q panel. I've kind of pulled it out to make it bigger. Normally it doesn't take up that much screen space, but I pulled it out to make it bigger. And here's where I can ask questions. I can have an interaction. I can do things in the console related to AWS. You get a couple example prompts just to help you learn how to use Q. So I could just click on one of these example prompts, and it'll tell me what to do. Or I can just start typing whatever I want to do. So let's do, how do I build a web app to run in AWS? And so, again, what is going on here, Q and CodeWhisperer are these generative AI systems built with large language models behind them. So large language models give us the ability to use machine learning and AI capabilities to be able to understand language and then generate new output. So everything you're seeing, the examples that Ankur was showing you with how CodeWhisperer works for code generation, we're not pulling code out of a dictionary or a library of code. That is the generative AI model understanding your intent and understanding how software development works and creating new code, net new code. So that code is your code. So when you use tools like CodeWhisperer, the prompts that you send into CodeWhisperer, that's your IP. You own that. That belongs to you. The code suggestions that come out of CodeWhisperer, that's your IP. It's your content. It belongs to you. And so it's all unique and it's all new and it's all yours, which is super cool. And the same thing is happening here in the console. I'm able to ask questions and I'm getting information. Now some of this, in this case, I'm asking a question. There's no real unique IP here, but I'm asking a question. I'm able to get some information back. And so it says, well, here's some ways you could build a web app in AWS. So if I said, what is the best choice if I want to run in containers, I'll just leave it at that. And then, so I can have these, what we call multi-turn conversations. I ask a question, I get an answer. I ask a follow-up question. The full context of the conversation I've been having is still part of that conversation. So when I ask the follow-up question, it didn't scroll down to me. Whoops, let me scroll down here. When I ask the follow-up question, it understands the previous question and the previous answer, and it uses that as context to give me that answer back. So the cool thing about Q is now you have this assistant at your disposal 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right in the console. You can ask it questions about AWS and about how to build applications and how to do things. And there's more interesting capabilities it has as well, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But let's continue on. And again, I'm going to skip the next slide because it just has the video of what I was showing you in real life. Wherever I can, I like showing it to you in real life because I think that's more fun. It's Vegas. Let's live on the edge, right? All right. OK. So now let's talk about Q in the IDE. So Q and CodeWhisperer are these things that work together. Think of CodeWhisperer as the tools that we integrate, the tools from AWS that we integrate into your development environment to help make you more productive. So you get CodeWhisperer, it's packaged into the AWS toolkit. CodeWhisperer is installed into your IDE, and with that you get this collection of tools that are designed around making you more productive as you're writing code. One of those tools now is Q. Q is one of the tools we want to bring into the development environment to help make you more productive. And so let's take a look at a couple things that we can do here. Just by quick show of hands, did anybody attend the session I did on Monday about CodeWhisperer? All right, I can use all the same tricks then. Fantastic. All right. No, I'm kidding. One of the things we did, because the session on Monday was before we announced Q, we didn't get to show some of this cool stuff. So we get to do a little bit of a variation of some of the things we did that show you all the cool things that Q can do. And so when we talk about how do you as a developer become more productive using these generative AI tools, there's a couple different ways that you can work. So one of them is sort of represented on the right-hand side of the screen, which is I'm working in my code editor, and I'm going to use natural language, in this case, English language, to express my intent. And in this case, I copy and pasted something from a requirements document. So I just said, OK, the requirements document said I need to satisfy these 5 requirements. So I just copy and pasted those requirements in. And so I'm giving the language model a really good kind of lengthy prompt to say, here's what I'm trying to accomplish. I want to write this function, and I want it to work this way. And here's the requirements for how that function should work and what it should do. Now, inside of CodeWhisperer, we have a classifier that's running. So think of CodeWhisperer as just being ambiently there. Right? You install it in your IDE, and it's kind of just there and paying attention to what you're doing. And we have this classifier that's running that looks at what is the best time to provide a code suggestion to you. So Ankur mentioned acceptance rate. Acceptance rate is the measure of how many times do we suggest code to you versus how many times do you accept that suggestion. So the denominator is how many times we are suggesting code to you. And we want to be very sensitive to that. We don't want to be noisy, right? We want to make sure that we're not annoying you with constant suggestions. But we do want to make sure we're giving you suggestions at the times where you might need them and might want them most and might be most receptive to them. So that's the job of the classifier, is to make sure that denominator doesn't get out of control. And then the numerator is how good we are at giving you a suggestion that meets the criteria for what you want to do. How often do you accept the suggestion? So if I were to go to a new line, at the very bottom of the screen, you see a little spinning circle next to CodeWhisperer, and it's doing something. And in this case, it came up with the fastest suggestion it could possibly give me, which is not the best one. Okay? In this case, it's saying, well, here's a method signature, and then we're just going to throw an exception that says that this hasn't been implemented yet. But that was the fastest suggestion it could get me. But that's not a great idea. I mean, that's one way to do it. Sure, it's possible. But we also want to make sure that we can, answer your queries quickly, but then also answer them more thoroughly. So if I push the arrow key to the right, I get another suggestion. I might have up to 5, so I can keep iterating through and see how many suggestions I get. And in some cases, they're just kind of variations on the same theme, different ways of doing things. But in this case, it's giving me really healthy, by healthy I mean big, code block suggestion based on what my requirements are. So if I just press the tab key, I've written that code to my file. So when we talk about being productive, the idea that what would it have taken me to write those 20 or 30 lines of code, including the time it would take me to think about what am I trying to do here? How do I do it? And if I don't remember something, do I have to go search for it or go look on a website somewhere or phone a friend or ask somebody? So a task as seemingly simple as this could actually be a 10 or 20-minute task, depending on how much I know about what I'm doing, or a 30-second task, 20-second task, 10-second task using CodeWhisperer. So now that I've done this, and I promised you we were going to talk about Q, and Q is sitting over here waiting for me. I just want to do something. So this is a TypeScript file, so I'm just going to, I've got all the CodeWhisperer command line stuff I showed you in the terminal is integrated into the terminal here within my IDE. And so I can get, the autocomplete and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go into my source directory, and I'm going to pretend I don't know what I'm doing and say Q compile the index.ts file. And it says, OK, that's a TypeScript file. You goofball, you just type TSC. It's that easy. And so we do that, and we execute that command, and it does that. So now I've compiled my TypeScript file. So now what's really cool is I've also got Q sitting over here. And so I can come over here and say, oh, you know what I didn't do? I forgot to export my function. That's all right. Easy fix. So now that red squiggly should go away. So now I can come over here and say, OK, now I want to test this function. So I've got my requirements still. Actually, I'm just going to copy my requirements off of a little text pad here. And I can come into Q and say, OK, well, Q, I want your help. So I'm going to say, I'm using Jest as my unit test framework. I want to write tests for the sum function, and here's those requirements. The same stuff I had in the other file, just saying, here's how it should work. So Q, help me out here. And I send that into Q. And Q can do a lot of the same cool stuff. And it can tell me all about what's happening here. So it says, OK, in order to do this, here's how you have to write the unit tests. And if I look through it, it goes through and gives me all the unit tests. And then it gives me a little summary of what it's telling me here. It tells me kind of a little bit about what's happening. Here's how the unit tests work and what they do. And I can just hit insert at cursor. Now I already have my import in there, so we'll get rid of that. And hit save. And then I can just say Jest to run my tests. And we got 5 passed, 1 failed. So now I've written code, and I've got one little problem that I've got to go figure out what it is in the test. And I can actually work with Q to help me identify where the problem is. I can use the in-editor completions to say, hey, how do I fix this problem? What do I got to do? Debugging by committee is never fun, so we're not going to do that here. But you kind of get the idea of what happens. Again, the goal being acceleration, right? How long would it have taken me to get to this point without using these tools? And now I have one simple little problem to solve, which I'm getting a clear message from the unit test to tell me where the problem is. It's telling me what requirement's not being satisfied. And I'll tell you, I've done this demo dozens of times. Sometimes I get 6 passing, sometimes I get 5 passing. So a lot of it comes down to what happened in the editor when I was writing the code and what did it generate, and what happened when I was generating the test. And just looking at this, I can tell you that in the function that I wrote, I'm handling an exception in a particular way, and the test is saying, hey, I'm not getting the specific error message back out that I expected. So it's a relatively easy task to debug. So that's super cool, and that's we get to do a lot of cool stuff with that. But there's all kinds of other things we can do too. And so we have a little bit of time, so I'm going to show you a couple other things here. That I'm going to kind of repeat a little bit of some of the stuff that Ankur talked about, which is new and cool. So if you've used CodeWhisperer before, which some of you said you had, in the last 10 days, we made significant changes. The command line capabilities got released about 10 days ago. Earlier this week, on Sunday, we released the security automatic vulnerability remediation capability, or the assisted remediation capability. For those of you who are C# developers, we released a Visual Studio 2022 plugin. We did model updates to make everything work better. So there's all kinds of stuff happening. And then on Monday, we released all the Q capabilities, which is super cool. So when I look at the code remediation capabilities, if I'm working in CodeWhisperer, one of the options I have under the CodeWhisperer tab is to run a security scan. Now, this has been a feature of CodeWhisperer since we launched it, because we took a really conservative position on responsible AI. Ankur mentioned things like the reference tracker and things like that. But when it comes to we're building an AI that's helping you write code. So we're writing some code, and we can do a lot of work on our side to make sure that the model is generating really good code, and the code is functional, and it's safe, and it's secure. And then it gets into your IDE, and then you touch it, and I have no idea what happens after that, right? I don't know what you do. Not blaming you, right? We're friends. But I don't know what happens. And so what I want to do is, Ankur mentioned this shift left concept. Like, let's bring things that we would normally do as maybe part of a CI/CD pipeline or a part of a process, and let's bring that earlier in the cycle to put it in the hands of the developer so that they can do some of that work before it goes into that pipeline, so it doesn't get kicked back out of that pipeline and have to be done again. We want to make that pipeline go as fast as possible. So being able to do a security scan and say, I just want to run this security scan. So it's going to look at the code that I have here. And by the way, if you're using this tool, if you're using the free version of CodeWhisperer, you can do this 50 times a month. Like, I love developers doing security scans 50 times a month. That's great. If you're using the professional version of CodeWhisperer, see, all the people that laughed were development managers. If you're using the professional version, you can do this 500 times a month, because professional developers do a lot of security scans. That's the way they work. And so it runs a security scan. It takes a little bit of time because it's passing all this stuff up, and it's going and analyzing it and figuring out what's going on. And then it comes back and says, well, here's what the issues are. And so it comes back and it says it found some issues. And I can click on an issue. I can hover over an issue. And it tells me what it is. So in this case, this was an insecure hashing that was detected. And it explains to me that APIs that are not recommended were found, and gives me some hashing. But it gives me this little diff view that says, here's the code you have currently. Here's the code you should have that will eliminate this vulnerability or this best practice that you're not following or something like that. One of the key parts of this, and again, if we tie this back into developer productivity, what we want is, over time, developers are learning about these things, right? You're learning about why this is a security vulnerability. So we give you some indication as to, not only did we detect this, but here's what it was, and here's how you fix it, so that you can learn over time and change your coding behaviors, be more productive from the get-go. But in the meantime, you can just click apply fix, and we'll change that code, and you get a little message that says, go ahead and run the scan again and make sure it's been fixed. Now, in this case, I've got a few other errors, so I would go through and check those errors as well. So I'd say, let's see, not selecting connection time, whoops. So I hover over it, and it tells me, so I'm not selecting the connection timeout correctly, blah, 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 blah. And then it just tells me to add a set timeout property. So I say, OK, I'll just apply that fix. And that code gets written into here. So you can see now line 54, there it is. OK? So the idea here is not only are we going to have the AI do the work for you and save you the time that it would have taken you to figure out what that problem was and fix it, but also giving you the information so that you're learning as you go and becoming a better developer. AI tools like CodeWhisperer and Q can serve to help you be faster, but they can also serve to help you be better. You can learn a lot about what you're doing and how you're doing it. All right, let's come back to here. I'm going to, once again, skip the little video thing and talk about what we have here. Now, there's a couple other new Q software development features that we announced. One of them is this feature development capability. This is some really cool stuff. So generative AI, CodeWhisperer Q, we're really good at being able to understand what you're doing and being able to write code around it. So why can't we just go do that for you? Why can't you just say, tell me what you want, and we'll go build it? Describe the feature that you want or describe the bug you're trying to fix, and we'll go off and do that work. And so I'm just going to show this in video because it's easier for this case to show. Let me come over here so I can maybe pause it and talk about it a little bit. So I was not fast enough. Here's the idea. You describe what you want. So what you saw, the first thing that happened was the description into the chat modality of Q, right? So you have a chat interface for Q. You describe what you want to do, and then the first thing that happens is we analyze your request, look at the code you have, and come up with a plan. So Q comes back and says, OK, based on your request, here are the things I'm going to go do, and gives you a plan. This is your opportunity to say, yes, go do that, or no, I want to change the plan a little bit. I want to change my requirements a little bit. I want to give you something different. So you get that step to make sure that you've given good directions and that Q knows what you're doing. And then once you like that, you click the button that says write the code. And I'll tell you right now today, if you go home and want to try this, the write the code button is not in CodeWhisperer today. We held it back at the last second. It is in a tool called Code Catalyst, where you can do the same functionality. Q is in Code Catalyst, and you can use it. But that write code step will be in CodeWhisperer very soon. And that's what you saw happen here is we hit write code, Q went off and wrote the code, and then came back and said, here's the diff. The first thing it did is it told me what changes it made. It said, I made changes to 2 files. And here's the changes in 1 file, and here's the changes in the other file. In this case, it wrote a whole second file where it added a bunch of tests. So it said, here's where we're going to make the change, and here's the test where we're going to make that change. So this is super cool when you talk about developer productivity, right? You can just say, hey, Q, go do this for me. I don't even want to spend the time on it myself. I want you to go do it. Everybody in this room, I feel like I'm going to be like, you get a new car, and you get an AI assistant, and you get an AI assistant, right? Because now everybody has a developer, assistant that you can just say, go do it. Just go do it. I want to get it done, which is super cool. And it's absolutely OK to be like roaring thunderous applause because of how cool that is. Thursday is a tough day. So similarly, as we take Q, again, spanning all of development and into the console and all these things, as we take Q into the console, the same idea applies. I can use Q to help me out in different ways. And so if I have issues that I'm finding when I'm doing things in the console, I can ask Q to help me out with it. So in this case, I'm working on a Lambda function, and I'm going to go in and I say, OK, I want to test my Lambda function. I want to make sure everything's working, and I get an error. There's something's not working, so I get an error, and I can look at it. But the cool thing is there's this new button that says Troubleshoot with Amazon Q. And so I can just say, I can spend the time to figure this out, but Q, can you just help me out here? And I click the button that says Troubleshoot with Amazon Q, and it does an analysis of what the problem was and comes back and says, here's the problem. We found the problem. This is what it is. And that's really cool, but then you want to say, okay, well, that's great that you found the problem, but how do I fix the problem? What is the next thing I go do? And so you say, help me fix this problem. And then Q spends the time to look at what's going on, what is the error message, what happened, and then it comes back again, very similar to the feature development capability, it comes back with a plan and says, here are the things you need to go do. Follow these steps to fix your plan. Some of that might be something you do in the console. Some of that might be something you have to do in your code. So in this example, we're going to go into our Lambda function and make some changes in the code. And in this case, it's saying, hey, we have to add an allow action on, in this case, the Bedrock text generation model. So we have to go into the code and add that action. Well, CodeWhisperer in the IDE is also really helpful there. So I can go into here and say, okay, well, here's where I need to add this. So I'm going to add a little comment that expresses my intent. This is what I'm trying to do. And then you'll see CodeWhisperer kick in and start generating some of the things that you need. In this case, it's only a couple lines of code, but we're like, yeah, we can do that. We can add the policy, add the allow, do the things, and boom, you're off and running. So the idea here is this is pervasive across your whole development lifecycle, from what I'm doing in the editor to what I'm doing in the console, helping me find the errors, helping me troubleshoot those errors, and then coming back into the editor and fixing those things with the assistance of Q and CodeWhisperer. But that's not all. But wait, there's more. He had enough. How many people here have Java applications? Whoa, whoa. All right, a bunch of people. How many people here only have modern Java applications? Okay. So one of the things that we did is we always look at like what is hard, what is difficult, what is time consuming in the software development process. And we look at all the places where there's bottlenecks and there's toil and there's just time spent doing things that are well understood, like not solving the new problems, but repeating the things we already know how to do. Transforming Java applications is one of those things. So taking an older Java application and upgrading it to a more modern Java application where you get rid of the deprecated dependencies and things like this. This is a very solved problem. It just takes time. And time is the thing that we're trying to give you more of. So we want AI to take over a lot of the heavy time things. We call it the undifferentiated heavy lifting. So with this code transformation capability, I can open up my project, my Java project in the IDE. In this case, I'm working in a JetBrains tool. So I've got an older Java project, and I can go into the Amazon Q section of the toolkit, and I can say, I want to transform this project. And so it says, OK, let's look at this project. We're going to do a transformation on it. And again, this is you assigning the task to Q. Like, hey, Q, just go do this task for me. And so it does the same kind of process. Let me analyze your Java application. Let me understand where there's maybe deprecated dependencies or ways of doing things that are from an older version of Java and not in a newer version of Java. And let me come back and tell you what my plan is, tell you the steps I'm going to take to go fix this. And then when you're ready, go ahead and tell me to go do it. Q is going to go off and make those changes. It's going to run some tests against the application to make sure it works. And it's going to come back and tell you when it's done and tell you what it did. So again, just like if you were to do a PR review with one of your engineers, it's going to come back and say, well, here's the changes I made. Here's why I made those changes. And here's me showing you that the application is now in a modern version of Java, and it works. So we go through and we get to see all the changes. We get to see that the tests run. And then we can go and say, OK, now we're all on new and happy and friendly Java. This is super cool, too, because, again, this is super time-consuming. For those of you who saw the keynote on Tuesday, we shared an interesting data point, which is, as we built this, we have a long history of building Java applications. So we have a lot of history in knowing what it takes to migrate Java applications and the process it goes through. So we're able to train our models on understanding Java applications and how Java migrations work. And in doing so, we were able to use the Q code transformation capability to migrate 1,000 Java applications in 2 days. 1,000 Java applications in 2 days. This would be the time for applause. Okay. There's a ton of other like super cool stuff that you can do with the integration of CodeWhisperer and Amazon Q. The fact that you now have this sort of, what I think of as this accelerator in the code editor, whereas as I'm writing code, I'm getting the, my function blocks are being completed for me, it's filling in the code for me. A lot of times what you'll see happen is, as you're writing your code, you'll get maybe just a method signature. You get a one-line suggestion that says, hey, here's what I think the method signature should look like. And that's that's Q and CodeWhisperer looking at that and saying, let me make sure I've got your intent correct. And if I've got your intent correct, I'll continue on. And so if you accept that single line function, that function signature, and you go to the next line, boom, it fills in the whole function body. So there's lots of different ways you're going to experience how Q and CodeWhisperer work. But the fact that now you can do things like, for example, let me give you a little for example here. If I were to, let's see, what project am I in here? If I were to look at this and say, let me open up this other project. Let me close my, if I were to go to Q and say, tell me what the code in this file does. Q has the context of what you're working on in your IDE, right? So we saw earlier, I said, hey, write these tests according to these parameters. I could just have easily just said, hey, write these tests according to this function, and it would have looked at the function and done the same work. But I wanted to make sure it covered all my edge cases, so I gave it all the parameters. But in this case, I'm saying, hey, look at this code file. Look at that. And this is in this one's in Python. Some of you said you like Python, right? And it says, tell me what this does, and it goes through, and it gives me a description of every method in this file and what it does and how it works. And so this is great for like the times where you're new to a project or you're working on something that you're more unfamiliar with. The thing we hear probably almost more than anything else from developers and development teams is we spend a lot of time reading code, way more time than we spend writing code. And we have to spend a lot of time reading code to understand a project that we're not familiar with, and our more junior engineers have to go bother our more senior engineers to ask about what the code does and how it works and what it does, or they go off and do some searching and try to figure something out. This, you have context, and you have an AI assistant that understands software development, and so you can just say, hey, tell me what this does, and we'll break it down and tell you. And you can ask follow-up questions, and you can say, like, help me find the bug here. Help me optimize this. Help me refactor this. Is this have the best time complexity? Can I improve it in some way? There's a lot of different things you can do with Q and how it works. I'm going to come to questions in just a minute. So one of the things I'm going to ask of you is to a bunch of you, some of you raised your hands and said you've used CodeWhisperer. I want you to go download the CodeWhisperer extension into your IDE. It's part of the AWS toolkit. So you go search for the AWS toolkit, you download it, you get in your IDE. You can log in to CodeWhisperer two ways. You can use the AWS Builder ID, which is just, hey, go sign up for a free Builder ID. It's just your email address, and you create a password, and now you have a Builder ID. And then you can use CodeWhisperer, and you can use Q. It's available to you for free. You don't have to pay anything. You don't have to use it. The one or two exceptions to that is you don't have access to the customization capability that Ankur was talking about, because that's part of our professional tier. And you don't have access to the code transformation and feature development capabilities I showed as part of Q, because those are also part of the professional tier. If you have an organization you want to try CodeWhisperer out, you can set up Identity Center in your account, and you can sign in with your Identity Center credentials, and then you're in the professional version of CodeWhisperer. It costs $19 per user per month, and all of these things are available and accessible for you to try, including the customizations, including the feature development, including the code transformations. I want you all to go try it and just experiment. Q is new, and it's in preview, and it's in the tool, and it can do a lot. It's amazing. Daily, I'm amazed when I try new things, and I talk to somebody like, can I do this? I'm like, I don't know. Let me try that out. Somebody asked me today if it could explain some obscure programming language. Like if I open a file and asked it to explain it, could it do it? I was like, maybe. Let's find out. I know the 15 languages we support, but it's pretty capable, and so it might know some other things as well. So just experiment. Go try it out. Go see what you can do. So with that, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to, in a second, say thank you. But before I do, I want to just do a little bit of wrap up. And after I say thank you, again, thunderous applause. Thursday afternoon, like no, wait, not till I say thank you, not till I say thank you. Thunderous applause after I say thank you. And then Ankur and I are gonna like make our way out to the hallway because we have to clear out of the room. And all the questions you have, we're more than happy to answer. We have nowhere to be immediately after this, so we'll be out there to answer all your questions. And so with that, on this Thursday afternoon, I'd like to say thank you.